Welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to smash that like button and follow us here at the Upside. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Tonight I wanted to get into some of the bigger topics before we get into the actual season. So I wanted to discuss what it takes to actually become a perennial contender, a perennial World Series caliber team. What types of things do you look for if you're a member of a front office, if you're a fan, or just a media person looking to see what teams really do that really works out well for them? Do they draft really well? Do they develop their talent really well? Do they continue to invest in free agency? We're going to get into all the different ingredients that make up a perennial World Series caliber team, that and much more. Also want to get into some of the injury scares we've seen, including Bobby Witt, a couple of relief pitchers, including Carlos Estevez and Kendall Graveman, Rangers as far as Tyler Mahle and Bradford. Lots of injury news out there, but we'll begin with our main topic tonight. What does it take to become a perennial contender in Major League Baseball? Well, first, you got to make sure you have some type of a pitching staff, whether that be an ace at the top and then guys who can at least be league average, or whether it's going to be just a bunch of, a little bit above league average guys, 2s and 3s in a rotation, that ultimately one guy has a great year, propels you to even higher heights, but you really don't have any weak links in that rotation. You might not necessarily be the favorite going in every single year, but you're very well in contention to get there every single year. You also have to manage your payroll. You can't exactly blow it out by saying, hey, the Albert Pujols, the Prince Fielders, the Giancarlo Stantons of the world. You can't continue to do that. Now, sure, we've seen kind of changes in the landscape as far as how the Los Angeles Dodgers just seem to be able to spend and spend and spend, but they're kind of the exception, not the rule. Now, they're going to be in contention for years to come because their ability to spend, and they found another revenue source today by announcing another sponsorship contract when they landed overseas. Dodgers are literally printing money right now. They can do no wrong financially. But looking at the other 29 teams, even the teams with really high payrolls, really great revenues, those teams still are governed by a budget of sorts. Even teams that are run by owners known as Steve Cohen, they're limited by certain financial constraints as well. Now, certainly some of the smaller market teams, the Pirates, the Marlins, the A's, the Rays of the world, can't even play in those pools. They're looking at maybe a $100 to $150 million roster at best at any time in their franchise right now. And they're not exactly able to go to the depths of even, teams like the Rangers or the Astros or the Braves, let alone the Yankees or the Mets, and definitely not even to the heights of the Los Angeles Dodgers. So how do you consistently build a World Series caliber team? Well, first you have to have an owner willing to spend at least some modicum of money, whether that be $150 million, whether that be $200 million, somewhere that's a little bit below or a little bit above league average. You don't want to have an owner who's sitting there pinching pennies, trying to count his revenue sharing money. You don't want to sit there and consistently have to deal with, bargain basement prices in free agency, or as far as even continually re-signing your own guys. It just makes things consistently more difficult. We'll see what happens as far as some of those smaller market teams, but you'd like to be in a situation where your owner realizes that you have a good team around you, and if they just chip in, say, an extra $15, $20 million, a lot of money for me to say, but for an owner in Major League Baseball, if they want to consistently win at the Major League level, if they have a really good team, they're going to have to invest some type of a money there. So that's item number one. You got to have an owner, you got to have some pitching, then you got to look at the lineup. Where exactly are you going to spend on that team? You have to have an aircraft carrier or two, and generally teams like to build up the middle. Center field, shortstop, their pitching staff, of course, and their catcher. Now, of course, you want to have a really big power hitter at some point along those corners. Third base, left field, right field, and first base. Perennially, second base hasn't been a great offensive spot in the past, but it certainly has risen in its spot over the years. Since basically Jeff Kent, we've really had some good second basemen come through Major League Baseball that have really raised the floor for second baseman overall. Now, catching offense is pretty much down across the sport. It's rare now to have a above average catcher, or at least a league average guy who can hit to the level of some other positions on the diamond. Now, if you have a guy who hits for an even better average, can even be a star, look at Adley Rutschman, look in the past at JT Realmuto. When you have one of those guys, you can really set your franchise up for success. And that spot continues to be productive as long as they're productive at the plate. So, how would I build a perennial World Series caliber team? First, looking at the pitching staff, I'd want to try to grow it from within. Looking at a team, say we're the Texas Rangers. We had our successful playoff run, getting to 2 different World Series. We ultimately bottom out in 2017. Realize it ain't us. It's time for us to go ahead and sell. Go ahead and go through a long, extended rebuild process. You start by trimming all your long-term contracts. Get all those off your roster. You go ahead and acquire outside money to get better prospects. We saw that with the Rangers, how they did that, bringing in Alex Jackson from the San Francisco Giants. They got in Jason Barr, I want to say was the prospect they got for him. He was a top 10 guy out of the San Francisco Giants system. At the time, it saved the Giants $4 million that year, $12 million total. Kind of think of what Miles Straw did this offseason for the Guardians, offloading his contract. The Blue Jays were able to parlay that into $2 million in international bonus pool money. That's what they were trying to utilize to bring in Roki Sasaki. So you can use your payroll to acquire prospects. You can use your payroll to leverage it for other teams. Take a bad contract off the books for another club, and your price of doing business is taking one of their better prospects or getting a prospect you like out of their system. So you trim all your long-term contracts. That way you free up your books. You also bottom out your payroll as low as you feasibly can that your owner is comfortable with. Your owner, of course, is never going to go against not having to spend money. If they can tell, or if you were to tell them, hey, I can get you a World Series championship team for free, the owner would say, sign me up. They wouldn't care one iota about that revenue sharing money because they would be rolling in the postseason money they would be making. Now, obviously, you ain't winning the World Series for a team that doesn't cost you a dime. So you're going to have to figure out how to get to that salary floor, quote unquote, where you can still get some of that revenue sharing money, to where you can still maximize your efforts in the minor leagues, to where you might be able to develop some talent at the major league level. Look at the Los Angeles Angels, how they're taking in some formerly failed pieces at other stops and are looking to get some last bits of the good baseball out of those guys for themselves, or to where they can trade them at the deadline. I'd be signing a lot of short-term deals, guys in my starting rotation that I know have experience that can shepherd my younger guys through a tough season, some professionals that are not necessarily knuckleheads in the clubhouse. Now, if there's a guy in free agency that's on a low-cost contract that could be a difference maker for a ball club, I might be willing to take the risk. Think of the days back when the Dallas Cowboys, for instance, were thinking they were Super Bowl contenders. They thought they were an edge rusher away. And so consistently they made big investments in really risky free agents. Think Greg Hardy, that type of free agent. In Major League Baseball, that equivalent, I guess, would be like a Trevor Bauer when he was still available to pitch, whenever he still had the ability to be a good starting pitcher. Yasiel Puig, players who are big names that if they have a really great start to the season, you could get a pretty penny back for them in return. Of course, all kinds of off-the-field issues are tied to that. Baseball is a lot more risk-averse to that category. But if there was a difference maker out there that made sense, that'd be something I would look into as well. Primarily, I'd be investing in everything I possibly could to draft and develop all of my prospects that I currently have. I'd draft a lot of young talent. I would sign a lot of international free agents that are 16, 17, 18 years old. And you have no limit to the number of international free agents that you can sign as long as you sign them for $10,000 or less right now. I'd be utilizing the heck out of that loophole. I'd be signing every guy I possibly could to be able to get some really nice prospects out of that system. Now, are the majority of those going to work? No. Is even 1 out of every 100 of those going to work? Probably not. But every now and again, you come across a dime in the rough, and who knows what that player might turn into. I would be looking to maximize on that talent. And I would take it very seriously to shepherd that talent slowly. I'm not rushing the talented player from low A ball to high A ball by the end of his second year in professional sports. I have him at double A and looking at bringing him up to the big league level at 19. The only way I'd be doing that is if he shows he's absolutely crushing the competition and is no longer learning anything else at those levels, and that he's ready for the next step. Make sure that he's ready between the ears. A lot of big league teams out there rush these guys to the big leagues, and they don't have a clue of what they're getting into. I would not be rushing these guys to the big league level. Now, once I've got my development going, I've got a couple of guys up at the big league level that show some promise. I've turned some older, expiring deals into prospects for my future. I now have a pipeline of talent coming. I'd make sure my talent is all relatively around the same age, that I have a wave of talent coming up at one time, and then I have another wave in the minors in another year or so when they hit to the major league level, and just keep kind of churning that and keep it going. And don't stop even once you become a good baseball team. You continue to keep that thing going. Always have another wave coming. Don't just say, hey, we won the World Series this year. We're going to try to invest in our major league team. We're not going to try to look towards the future at all. Sure, you want to maximize the talent on the big league roster when you win a World Series. You want to repeat. Understandably so. But you can't forego the development process at the minor league level because of your success at the major league level. That just means you're closing your window all that much more fast because of that inability to think long term. So again, keep that thing churning. Every couple years, you should have a wave of talent coming, whether it be 2 or 3 really good prospects. Ideally, when you're a rebuilding ball club, you want to have 5 or 6 guys that are premium prospects coming through the ranks together, and then have another squad of 5 or 6 guys in that next wave that come up and can supplement your roster as well. That first wave hits, you figure out which pieces ultimately work. Say half of them turn into really good big leaguers. Maybe one of them, luckily enough for you, turns into a star. Your next wave hits after that group has come and gone. You've been signing those low-cost free agents, taking on bad deals that you can continue to churn that roster over, keep that farm system fresh, keep it getting more and more talent. And so you're continually in the top 10 as far as farm system ranks. That's the best way to do it. And there's a lot of teams out there that don't really slip outside of the top 10 from year to year. Now, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a lot of turnover from some of the best teams. You look at the Atlanta Braves, who had all that young minor league talent. It's kind of gone by the wayside. The Orioles had a ton of minor league talent when they had Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman at one point, Jackson Holliday right now. This is a team that's kind of had all those guys graduate to the big league level. We're talking Kowser, Westberg, Hurstad as well. They don't have another wave that's coming as of yet, but what they do have is a ton of picks where they can replenish that next wave immediately. So the Orioles are one team that I think is trying to do this kind of constant wave kind of thing that I've been talking about here. But Baltimore, they don't spend at the level that they need to at the big league level. That would be the next stage once you get through the prospects. Do you continue to invest in the pieces that you have and just hope eventually they work out? No, eventually you're going to have a sink or swim moment for those guys. Some of those guys are not going to work out. And so that's when you utilize your ownership that's willing to spend 120 to 150 million for those small market teams. Bump up that salary when you're finally ready to be a contender. Go ahead and add a big free agent starting pitcher. Maybe you continue to go low-cost bullpen guys because, again, those are more mercurial. One year they're good, one year they're bad. But overall, you continue to keep that talent on the big league roster churning. Try to keep improving. And that's when you finally invest that major league dollar, that major league free agent in there. And you try to avoid signing guys that are tied to compensation. Now, sometimes you can't avoid it. You have a player in an absolute need at a spot. He's a perfect fit. Just everything seems to work out. And so be it, you lose the pick. But ideally, you'd want to find somebody without compensation tied to him. You'd also want to do very well as your professional scouting. Make sure you're scouting other teams so that when you do come across a trade offer, that you're not going to get fleeced by the other ball club. They don't take your best pieces or the pieces that you don't think are so good. They end up going to the Rays and turn out to be all-stars. How many times have we seen the Rays take 3 or 4 prospects that we don't have any idea how good they're actually going to be? Their own organization doesn't have very high in the rankings. Baseball America doesn't even have them ranked. And yet the Tampa Bay Rays are like, hey, I'll give you this Cy Young Award starting pitcher for these 4 prospects. Maybe you should second guess, hey, if they're seeing something in these 4 guys, maybe I should reevaluate my own talent in-house. And on the other hand, if you're trading with the Tampa Bay Rays or some other team out there, what exactly are you getting back? If you're getting a Cy Young pitcher in there, how much does he have left in the tank? What's his contract situation? You want to make sure you're always keeping things going there. All right, then finally, you've gotten to the contending window. You've made the first time. You've made it to the playoffs. You're ready to compete. You got a manager that's been there, done that. You're experienced at the big league level, whether it be just continually grooming these young guys. That manager knows what he has to work with and knows what it takes to win. or at least has a bench coach that has some experience in the playoffs so that they can shepherd the team through the tough times. You sign a couple of veterans that have been there and done that the first time you get there so that your young guys don't get the yips. They don't see the moment as too big for them. You finally win the big one. You're lucky enough to be a team that wins the World Series. What do? Do you just try to re-sign every single one of those guys and say, you know what, man, we've never won a World Series in franchise history, so I'm going to go ahead and sign every one of you guys because you guys are so special? It'd be nice to be able to do that kind of a thing, but that's not what's best for business. You still want to make sure you're making smart baseball decisions. If a guy's in the back nine of his career, you don't give him the biggest contract he's ever seen in his career before that point. If you have a bunch of younger guys coming up from the minor leagues that are going to take his spot, you don't let him keep that spot and stop the prospects that you have coming unless it means further success for you at the big league level. For instance, the Texas Rangers have Corey Seager and Marcus Semien at second base and shortstop. They do have a ton of middle infield guys that are backing them up right now. Jonathan Ornelas, Ezekiel Duran, Josh Smith. Are any of those guys better than Corey Seager or Marcus Semien? No, so that's why they still have their spot. You're not going to go ahead and jettison those guys just because the other guys are younger and make less money. You still want to maintain some type of a standard at the big league level. Got to do a tough balancing act. So you're lucky enough, you've won a World Series, you got your minor league system still churning out great pieces, you're making smart baseball decisions, and the final piece is to not sign any ridiculous contracts. So for instance, Pete Alonso this offseason, say you had decided, I need a power bat more than anything else. That's what's going to turn me into a World Series contending team and possibly win another one. I'm the Rangers, I need a proven first base bat. Alonso's one of the best power hitters in the game. The heck with our luxury tax threshold. Let's go ahead and sign him to a 5-year deal worth $30 million a season. Making that type of a mistake, an Albert Pujols type of a mistake right now, at that time in your win curve, really can take your title window, your contention window, and shorten it to just a couple of years. Because then years 3, 4, 5, and 6 of that deal don't look so good, and you're stuck financially. Your owner looks at you and says, hey, you said if I gave you this extra money that you'd be a contending team. Well, because you spent that extra money on a player who's not very good, I'm not willing to allow you to continue to spend money at this level. I'm taking money back off my table, and there we go. That's the end of your contention window. So, making sure you keep smart baseball people in there at all times, making sure you're making good decisions in the draft and development process, and of course, it takes a little bit of luck along the way. But as long as you're handling those things, the controllables there, making sure you're doing your homework, making sure that things are being handled properly throughout the entire development process from the minor leagues, from the time they sign with your club to the time they take the field with your big league team, making sure every piece of that is taken care of first is the beginnings of every great franchise we've seen. All right, appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Rafe, Holly, thank you guys. Mark, welcome in, welcome in. I'm scared runs will lose us, our Suns will lose more than us, and we'll be playing or losing or with a losing record. I don't think the Mavericks will be in the play-in. I don't think you have to worry about that one. I think the Mavericks might win maybe 2 more games the rest of the season. However, they are getting P.J. Washington back, and you never know what type of energy he's going to give to the Mavericks, at least right now. They're very proud players, especially with Klay Thompson there. That's not wrong with what I mean. Yes, I understand what you're saying there, Rafe. Developing young pitchers is number one, true. That's kind of where you want to start. Those are the harder ones to develop. The other way of thinking is if you develop some minor league hitters, those are easier to develop, and because you can kind of track their progress a little bit better and kind of manage their progression more effectively. If you're able to do that correctly with enough guys, you might be able to trade for the pitching that you need. For instance, the Texas Rangers, that's kind of what they did with their development window here. Yes, and of course they spent an ungodly amount of money in free agency on Seager and Semien and DeGrom and Eovaldi and so forth and so on, but they also used a lot of positional player depth rather than starting pitching depth. That's one thing the Rangers have not been able to do since I've been alive, really, is to develop healthy starting pitching. Every time they get a blue chip prospect as far as a pitcher, something goes wrong. They trade him away before he reaches his peak value. They get him to the big league level and he blows out his arm. He's in the minor leagues, looks great at Double-A. He comes back in for spring training, and then this year Alexander Rosario blows out his arm and needs Tommy John. And it's just one year after another after another. They have a really great prospect who comes in one year and is lights out, a sub-2 ERA with over 120 innings pitched at Double-A. You're thinking, oh, great, he's going to break through spring training and possibly start the season with the Rangers, only to find out he gets the yips in the offseason and can't throw the ball over the plate, let alone anywhere near the catcher. That's the kind of luck the Rangers have had. So pitching is a lot harder to develop, but if you can develop really solid position players, while there are more quantity of those than there are pitchers, you can get you can get to a more league average team at the very least with a very good positional player group there, and then trade for the pitching that you need or sign it. There's different ways of doing it, just as long as you're developing that talent and being smart along the way. Casey Mize is on fire. I have not checked on Casey Mize too much, but he really needs it after a tough year last year. Rafe, Leiter having command problems makes me wonder if Maddox don't work on technique with him. I'm sure Maddox works on technique with him. I'm sure Leiter is actually working with several different coaches, including his dad, who was a great major league pitcher as well. But as far as Jack Leiter is concerned, I just think he needs to get out of his own head sometimes and stop listening to so many voices and just go out there and pitch and just cancel out all the noise. Just don't sit there and get in your head about, am I overthrowing? Am I underthrowing my pitch? Do I have enough spin on it? Do I not have enough spin on it? And he just looks like a pitcher that's thinking the game a little bit too much at times. When he's not thinking, he looks very sharp, very crisp in his delivery, very pinpoint in his accuracy. When he starts to get in his head is when we start to see those control problems, when he's trying to aim the ball rather than throw the ball. And that's one thing I'd like to see him kind of solve as we go through the year. I still think he's going to have a very bright future either way. Let's see here. Mark, with Bradford out, guess both Rocker and Leiter both in the rotation, 4 and 5 spots to start the year. Bradford is going to miss the next 4 or 5 days. They're just going to shut him down for a little bit. He did have some elbow soreness. Very scary when you think of the elbow. He did have a clean MRI. Molly had a clean MRI as well. But there is some thought that Bradford could miss significant time this year if the elbow injury persists. And I think Leiter could be the first guy that they opt to go with in that rotation. Leiter wouldn't be that far behind. Tim, welcome back. This year the Mets will be the team to beat in the NL and World Series contenders. I think the Mets will be very good, but to say that they're the team to beat, I think that would be a little bit of a short-sighted view. The only reason being, I think everybody and their mother knows the Los Angeles Dodgers are the best team in the National League on paper. Now, whether or not they actually do it in the regular season, we'll have to wait and see. The Mets still have some rotation issues that they have to deal with, and I think they will. But at least for right now, the Dodgers look like the significantly better team between the two. Now, once we get to October, you never know what can happen in a short series. Even if the Dodgers are light years better than every other team on the face of the planet, way better than any other team we've ever seen in baseball history, they can still be taken out by a couple of bad games in October. That's how baseball works. Sometimes David does beat Goliath. Not saying that the Mets are not a great team as well. I'm just saying that the Dodgers really did a great job solving every single issue they could possibly have this offseason. Lineup, best in baseball. Rotation, best in baseball. Bullpen, best in baseball. And, oh, by the way, that's without including several guys who are out injured in that rotation and in that bullpen right now. Now, the lineup, I think they could use one more bat. Ha-Seong Kim has been optioned down to the minor leagues. Tells me that his bat really is a whole lot lighter than they were hoping for. We discussed this last night. Maybe Nolan Arenado isn't completely out of the woods, or as far as out of the realm of possibility for the Los Angeles Dodgers to trade for. Holly, Leiter needs to get out of his own head and stop trying to do too much. Right there with you, my friend. My 0 ERA, 14 in the third innings, 14 Ks. That's really good. Or 11 in the third. Okay. It's still spring training. Guys are working on stuff. I will say that don't take spring training performances as gospel. A lot of older veterans don't really use the spring training to really try to worry about their numbers or what their average is by the time they're done in spring training. I'm not worried about Corey Seager, who's hitting 135. I'm not worried about any of the other guys who have really high ERAs right now that are veterans. Now, the younger players who are trying to make a role for or make an impression on their big league clubs, those are the guys I'd be paying more attention to. If they have a really great spring training, could lead to them being an early call-up in the season, and just getting that positivity going early in the season for them could be big for their futures. If they go into spring training and just screw the pooch, then, more than likely they're going to be asked to develop a little bit more, might take them a little longer to get to the big league level, and it might hurt their overall development. So kind of a double-edged thing here. Sebastian Walcott's had a great spring training for the Texas Rangers. There's no way they're calling him up just because spring training went well. They're going to let him develop at Double-A this year, and maybe, best case scenario, say he's knocking the cover off the ball, hitting 500 through 50 games. That'd be an incredible sample size. The Rangers would be crazy not to bring him up at that point and find a spot for him in the lineup every single day. Is that likely to happen? No. That's why he'll take some time at Double-A, learn how to handle some rough patches as he gets through the minors, and learn some things about how to avoid pitches outside of the zone, learn a little bit more about his game and how he should swing, and all those kinds of things that you learn in the minor leagues. And then when he's ready for the next step to Triple-A, or if they just want to bring him up to the big leagues late in the year, I would expect him to be at the big league roster at some point when rosters expand, sometime this season or early next season. Maybe he could be an early season call-up at that point. But, take spring training stats with one big, huge grain of salt. They're helpful, sure, to see guys who are starting the year strong or could start the year strong. For instance, Matt Olson for the Braves had a rough year last year but had a nice finish. And so far in spring training, he's looked pretty solid. Wyatt Langford had a pretty great run-up through his minor league run last year, and then ultimately, or the year before anyway, and then last year he was called upon to play every single day for the Rangers. Largely didn't quite live up to the power numbers we were expecting from him, and then all of a sudden he broke out in September and looked absolutely dominant. Now, when he comes into spring training, right as they're about to begin spring training games, he pulls an oblique, so they say 5 to 7 days, he'll be back. Well, they were even more precautious with that than they originally intended. It sounds like they waited about 2 weeks before they allowed him to get on the field, and I think he's played about 3 games so far, and he's looked very sharp in those, and just kind of goes to show you, spring training doesn't exactly mean everything, but every now and again you can see a hot hitter, still be there, and maybe get the positive juices flowing. Meanwhile, a guy that's having a rough time trying to have a role on the big league club for the Rangers, Ezekiel Duran, hitting like 118 so far. He's in real danger of not being on the roster at the big league, or when the rosters are finalized for opening day. He could very well be traded to a team that's in a struggling situation when they try to use his spot on the roster for another bullpen piece, or Jonathan Ronellis, who's been really great this spring training. But he's a guy that I thought was a lock for this roster to begin the season unless they traded him. I think that even if they don't find a trade partner, they could end up optioning him if he even has an option left, or just trying to DFA him and see if they could trade for whatever they can get at that point. But he's one guy that I thought had a lot of promise for the Rangers a couple of years ago, and it looks like right now he might be playing himself out of a spot of the roster on opening day. All right. Should the Mets call up Sproat from the minors and add him to the opening day roster? Possibly. It's just about whether or not you're willing to start the clock on him. I would be looking more veterans in that way. I'd be looking at guys like Kyle Gibson, somebody along those lines. They do have guys that they can utilize on that roster right now to where they don't need to use Sproat. Now, if they continue to have injuries pile up in that rotation, then maybe they go ahead and get it done. But I would expect them to go more veterans first before they bring up Sproat. Let's see here. Mark, I would assume both Pennington and Latz have been sent down to minor league camp. I hope they are both built up as starters. I'm not sure they will be. I've heard some conversation both ways on it. But I think they just need to get more confidence and more consistent in their ability to throw strikes. That's the biggest thing with Mike Maddox and Bruce Bochy. You're coming up and walking hitters. You better be able to get out of trouble very, very quickly. And they haven't shown the ability to do that, and they don't even want to see the walks to begin with. But if you're giving up walks, you better be an all-star level pitcher or better, and they ain't that yet. So they need to work on their command more than anything else. Rafe, Clay Holmes has been really good too. 9 2/3, 2 hits, 13 Ks. That's good news. Spring training, but all still good to see. You think he'll start the season hot? Hopefully, or will they start the season hot? I should say a couple of guys playing out of their minds, yes. Rafe, how has Tavares looked? Trade-worthy or fourth guy in the outfield? Well, Carter has not looked good so far. He's hitting like 180 coming into action today. Still looks like he's trying to get his feet underneath him, get that bat swing back the way that it was working as he was building through the minors. And I think he's a player that's going to need some time. I think there's no way they trade Tavares, at least right now. In fact, I think Tavares might actually win the job out of spring training that I thought was Evan Carter's to lose. Well, he lost it. He hasn't played well enough yet. And I thought Kevin Pillar has played really well. He might be a guy that they actually keep on the active roster and use his spot, or use Ezekiel Duran's spot to carry 5 outfielders, because Kevin Pillar could at least handle the left-handed pitching. Now, you'd have to make a decision fairly quickly in the year with Evan Carter. Do you option him down, let him continue to grow in the minors? That's a possibility as well. But as far as trading Tavares, I think that's completely off the table right now. I think Pillar is a good shot to make this team, and Tavares looks like he's going to get the job in center to begin the year. Carter just doesn't look like he has enough at-bats underneath him yet, that he doesn't have that swing underneath him yet. There is some discussion about whether or not they keep him on the Major League roster and let him enter the season and see how things work out. Again, it's spring training. You don't know how things will work out because you can't really take anything from spring training. But I will say Carter's looked a little bit overmatched in some of his at-bats. He needs to get more reps, and I think he'd probably be best being utilized in the minors in AAA for at least a couple of weeks to get his feet underneath him once again. We'll see if the Rangers decide to go that route. I know it's not what Rangers fans want to hear, but it sounds like what may ultimately happen. Can't Pillar play the infield some, or am I thinking of someone else? You're thinking of someone else. That was actually a question that was posed to Jeff Wilson on the DLLS podcast, was if Kevin Pillar could actually play a little bit of infield as well. No, he cannot. I know Evan Carter played a little bit of first base at one time, not as a regular kind of thing, but as out of an emergency injury situation in the minor leagues at one point. But none of the guys that are in the outfield mix besides Jock Peterson are guys that have played first base of any length, besides maybe Josh Smith and Ezekiel Duran. Jake Berger is, of course, going to get some time over there as well. But we'll see how this lineup ultimately comes together. But tough start to the spring, at least for Evan Carter. Good news is that no real injury issues have cropped up for him. And it's just a matter of getting him more experience, but we shall see. I do think Carter needs to go down for a while. That's kind of my thoughts as well. I can't remember if he has options left. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up here with you guys. Usually this site tells me if I have options left. Evan Carter, he does have options remaining. Okay. So they could easily option him down, and he makes the roster. In fact, Fangraphs now expects Pillar and Tavares to make it. And look, they don't even have Ezekiel Duran making this roster anymore. They're with me on this thought process here. I did not think Fangraphs would be paying that much attention to spring ball, but they're right on it. I think that's fairly accurate. Now, the lineup that you see up there, I think is pretty close to what you'll see. However, Evan Carter, I think if he gets optioned, I think Leody Tavares immediately goes back to being your number 9 hitter. I think Jake Berger probably moves up. Maybe Josh Smith gets in the regular lineup instead. But he's looked fairly decent this spring as well, has a better eye at the plate early in the season. Hopefully that'll translate. He has had a little bit more power in spring as well, but we shall see. Rafe, I wonder if Smith could work up a high enough praise to make the Rangers have to accept a trade for him. I think he's already got a high enough trade value around the league right now. I think the Rangers just really prize his versatility. And while I think it would be wise for them to capitalize on it right now, they realize he is an invaluable asset to a contending team. Now, there are a lot of guys who can be used in a sparing role at the big league level that I think could be better suited for a bench role, be used maybe once, twice a week at best. Josh Smith needs to be in the lineup and deserves to be in the lineup at least 5 to 6 times a week. And, we'll see how they ultimately decide to break this thing down. They did utilize Josh Smith as the leadoff hitter with the absence of Marcus Semien in the lineup today. Of course, spring training, they're not going to have their full lineup in every single game. They'll have days off for a lot of their veterans in the spring, give them some time off to build up their strength for the season. Nothing to worry about on the injury front. Jonah Heim had a nice base hit today. His swing actually looks pretty good. He's looking a little bit more confident. The one thing for him is he's hit a lot of ground balls last year. His ground ball rate spiked. That's the one thing I'll be paying attention to early in the year, is how that ground ball rate works for Jonah Heim. Is he hitting the ball in the same rate as he did last year, or is he getting back to the numbers we saw in 2023? I think a lot of that has a lot to do with the success for Jonah Heim. He is not a burner as a catcher. Will not be confused with one. He is a smart base runner, but he needs to get on base first to be able to do that. Let's see here. Heim been swinging it better, at least to back up Iggy. He's going to be the starter. They're going to kind of split time there, 1A, 1B. I think Heim will get the majority of the work, but they're going to be kind of splitting it fairly equal. You're not going to see him throw or catch like 110 games to the backup of Higashioka, who might only start 50. It's going to be a pretty even split. You're going to see like 85 to 75, somewhere in there as far as a split there. Marcus was sick, yes. I did hear about that as well, but again, nothing long term. It's just the normal stuff normal crud you see going around every clubhouse out there. Hopefully for Roman Anthony, I told you guys he lost 10 pounds because of the illness he had. Hopefully he gets back as well. Who will be the opening day catcher, Heim or Higgy? I would definitely say Jonah Heim will definitely be your opening day catcher for Nathan Eovaldi. As far as the lineup, though, I do think the one guy who might get into this lineup over Evan Carter could be a bullpen arm, or could be Jonathan Ornelas. He's playing his way really. He's played really well, and I think he deserves to be on this roster. Now, whether you want to continue to get him regular at bats in the minor leagues or have him be a bench bat on your major league roster will be interesting to see how to utilize him. I think he'd be a really good defensive replacement late in games. The question will be, who does he go in for? You're not taking out your bat and Corey Seager. You're not taking out Simeon, who's been great as defensively at second base. Josh Young, if healthy, is going to be there for sure over there at third base. He's been great defensively at third base. Josh Smith, if he's over there at first, do you put in Ornelas over there? He hasn't got a lot of time over there at first base, if much at all. Maybe they give him a little bit more time as far as reps early in the season in practice and so forth, learning how to play the defensive position of first base. And that way they don't have to utilize his bat at the minor leagues and just try to keep him fresh at the big league level and just see how things work out that way. Or maybe give some DH days to Corey Seager early in the season just to make sure he's fresh. Same thing for Adolis Garcia would be another spot. I think that they could try to keep him fresh, is just utilizing that DH spot. That's the advantage of not just having a guy that's an everyday DH. Jock Peterson is at this point to me a certain DH here. But I would say that they are trying to give him some defensive versatility here so that they can deploy him, if necessary, for 10 to 20 games in the field. But he will primarily be in that DH spot when he is in the lineup. On the days when he's not, he might be sitting on the bench and be utilized as a pinch hitter late in games. Rangers really haven't had somebody of his ilk be a guy that could come off the bench and be a impact bat off the bench in a while, at least to his caliber. So we'll see what this really looks like, how they utilize him as the year goes along. Can I get that illness? I wouldn't mind losing 10. Heck, I wouldn't mind losing like 60 or 70 myself. I mean, shoot. I made a really good Asian-inspired rice dish anyway. Was tried to keep it really authentic by using Spam in it. But man, it was so heavy. Shoot, I feel like I could lose 100 pounds after eating that. Man, that thing stuck to my ribs and then some. But I'll put it this way. I just hope all these players get through spring training healthy, without blowing out their arm, without taking a pitch to the arm or hit by pitch or anything like that. The hit by pitch we saw for Bobby Witt was scary. He's going to undergo additional testing tomorrow. We'll see how things ultimately work out for Bobby Witt, but it sounds like he's avoided any significant damage, whereas Josh Young, unfortunately, fractured his wrist last year in Game 3 of the season, and that derailed his entire 2024 season. I just hope that doesn't happen again. Young has had some really bad luck with some really fluke injuries, and I just hope he gets a full, healthy season under his belt. He's 27 years old now. He's just entering the prime of his career, and I think he's still going to be a great player. The one thing I think he really needs to work on is avoiding swinging at a breaking ball down and away from him. That's the one area I thought I'd like to see him work on the most this offseason. The season will be the telltale for him. Does he show the ability to lay off that pitch, or does he continue to chase it? And does he also chase that high fastball that's up at his eyes that continues to rise and rise and rise? But we shall see. All right. If Leiter and Rocker both make the rotation, are you wasting Dunning in the bullpen, or does 2 of 3 go to the minors? No, I would say Molly and Bradford are both injured to start this season. I think there's a good chance both of those guys would start in the rotation. I do think they're going to try to piggyback Dunning with DeGrom. I think that's the plan. That's the priority, making sure DeGrom is healthy. That's priority number one. They will try to utilize the other arms that they have in their farm system before they put Dunning in there. Or if they don't have somebody quite to the level of Leiter and Kumar Rocker ready to go at the start of the season, or if they're already in the rotation and then all of a sudden John Gray goes down, then Dunning will be called upon to be one of those starters. Then they'll call some guys out of the minors to be the long relief for the days that DeGrom does start. Rafe, do you think Walcott could break the opening day roster next year, assuming he has a good spring? Good spring, no. He's going to have a phenomenal spring to break out of camp next year. I think there's a possibility that happens, though. First thing I thought about Witt was Josh Young. That was me as well. I just want a healthy DeGrom for the playoffs, please, for the love of everything. I'm with you there, my friend. All right, appreciate you guys joining us again. Remember, just a reminder, we'll have our new show heading your way on Sunday, a sports talk show featuring all four major sports. We'll talk a little NHL, a little NFL free agency, talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs coming up and how the Mavericks ultimately screwed their franchise for the next 5 years and completely destroyed their legacy. We'll talk about how the Lakers have all of a sudden become title favorites after making one of the craziest trades in NBA history. We'll talk about how the movement of the NFL quarterbacks affects the league, and we'll touch on all kinds of different stories around Major League Baseball that we don't get the time to talk about here. But be sure to join us for that one. We will do that show, I believe, Sunday. I haven't decided on a time yet. We'll kind of narrow that down as we get closer to it, but I'll have more information coming on in the upcoming days as well. So be sure to join us for that one. That show will probably last about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on how the response is from you guys. But appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow night. Stay safe, everybody.